Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another special edition of the LSU Sports Insider podcast. I'm Zach Ewing, and this is a women's basketball special edition LSU UCLA Elite 8 postgame show. And the Tigers' season has come to an unfortunate end in the regional final for the second straight year. Final score: UCLA 72, LSU 65. So not the end that LSU fans were hoping for, I know, but we are going to talk about it for the next 30 minutes or so. We welcome your comments, your questions. We will show them on the air. We will get to them as best we can. We only ask that you keep it clean. I will be joined in a little bit by advocate columnist Scott Rabalais, and then hopefully also by LSU women's basketball beat writer Reed Darcey, who is live in Spokane and is talking to the Lady Tigers right now, and he will have some insight from them. So UCLA wins this one 72-65. As we settle in for the postgame show, want to let you know that this postgame show is brought to you by Our Lady of the Lake Health. They are the official championship healthcare partners of LSU athletics. Again, 72-65, your final. UCLA advances to the Final Four. That is the first time in school history for the Bruins. Obviously, LSU wanted to be the ones going to Tampa to take on either UConn or USC, which is the regional final taking place in Spokane tomorrow for the final spot in that Final Four. So Flau'jae Johnson had 28 points tonight. She was fantastic. We'll talk about her. Real nice bounce back for her after a bad night Friday night in the Sweet 16 and an injury late in that game, but she came back. She played tremendously well. She had 28 points. Unfortunately, the rest of the Tigers just did not shoot the ball very well. They shot 37% from the floor. They were, you see it there, 25 of 67. That included subpar shooting by the standards of Michaela Williams, Anissa Morrow, Kaylin Gilbert. Pretty much any Tiger outside of Flau'jae Johnson did not shoot the ball well. I don't think there was a single player, except for Jersey Wolfenbarger made her only shot from the floor. She was one of one. So that's the only player besides Flau'jae who made more than half of her shots. So, right, going to bring on Scott Rabalais. He is here, advocate columnist. He was watching the game from home in Baton Rouge with the rest of us. And Scott, just kind of getting started here. A tough one for LSU. There's a lot of things we could point to, but I had pinpointed the shooting to begin with. The shots LSU was hitting in the first three rounds of this tournament. And you got to credit UCLA's defense to a certain extent, but there were also some good looks that just weren't going in for LSU tonight.
Yeah, that's right. That's the way it goes sometimes. And in the interest of full disclosure, I'm in a hotel room in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm at a convention with my wife. But was watching the game here, and there was a hailstorm outside. Hail was hitting our window here in the second half, but we got through it. But yeah, it's the way it goes. So, sometimes I hate to say it, but it sounds like cliche-ish, but a lot of the shots weren't falling for LSU. They shoot 37.3% from the field, really kind of heated up at the end of the game. UCLA hit 10 of 24 three-pointers and really were better than that at one point in the game. And it's not the percentage for UCLA, really. It's the number of three-pointers, with a combination of Lauren Betts inside and some really prolific three-point shooting. That was going to be tough for LSU. And Jaquez, one of their guards, went 4 of 5 from three-point range. Gardner went 5 of 8. And that more than Betts, I think, who was very good at 17 and 7, not nearly as offensively potent as she was in the Sweet 16 round. But that was really what spelled LSU's doom. One of the things was that the UCLA, the two games they lost to USC, they didn't shoot well from three-point range, and LSU was 5 of 15, but just really couldn't match it and had a couple of late three-pointers. So. That's the way it goes. It just gets the climb gets steeper and steeper when you get to the Elite 8, and you go from the first round, the second round, the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8, then to the Final Four. It just gets steeper and steeper, and that's why what else you did 2 years ago was really special and will continue to be so. And the Tigers come up a little short again this time, but it's not because of a lack of effort or a lack of trying or a lack of heart. Just not enough execution, I would say, against a very, very good team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree pretty much with everything you said. Unfortunately, the shooting touch just wasn't there, and I did want to pinpoint that second quarter.
Definitely.
And Hakeem has a comment here. UCLA made 10 3-point shots. Well, what happened? Lauren Betts got her second foul late in the first quarter. I think there's like a minute to go in the first quarter. She leaves the game, and at the time you're sort of thinking, okay, how long can UCLA afford to roll the dice with Lauren Betts out of this game? She's their star player. They showed the stat on the broadcast. They're like a plus 320 when she's in the game this year, and a -3 without her.
Right.
Like an incredible difference. Just a totally average team without her. The best team in the country when she's on the floor. So the question is, how long can they gamble to keep her out? And LSU's up by 4 points at the end of the first quarter. So they go from up 4 to down 6. And the answer was Lauren Betts didn't have to play a single second in that second quarter. She never had to risk the third foul. And it's because UCLA got the outside game going. You mentioned Gabriela Jaquez hit 4 threes in this game. Tamia Gardner off the bench hit 5 threes. Everybody else in their team actually wasn't that good from 3, but those two just killed LSU. And it was in that second quarter where it was almost like, I don't know, Rab, did LSU relax with Lauren Betts on the bench, or did it just sort of throw their defensive strategy for a loop a little bit because they knew UCLA was going into Lauren Betts basically every time down the floor. And when UCLA didn't do that, it was almost like LSU got lost a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I thought when she went to the bench and sat out the entire second quarter, it was advantage LSU, right? Because this is their big play, literally their big player. I mean, and they outscore LSU 22-12 in the second quarter. Gardner was 3 of 3 from 3-point range, and Jaquez made another one. UCLA was 4 of 6 overall from 3-point range, and they didn't have to go back to it. It's very similar to what happened in the second round game with Florida State when Michaela Williams sat the whole second quarter and Flau'jae Johnson sat most of the second quarter with foul trouble in that second round game. Despite how well Tanaya Latson was scoring for Florida State, LSU was able to weather the storm and not risk sending them back out there to get another foul, and they still held on to the halftime lead, 50-49 in that wild first half in Baton Rouge. So this was kind of similar to me, that UCLA didn't have to risk Betts. They just brought her back into the second half, and when they did, they extended that second half lead up to 14 points, and LSU fought gamely back. I mean, got all the way back down to a 3-point game late in the fourth quarter, but could get no closer. And it's just a lot to ask to overcome something like that. But that to me was the key of the game. It seemed like UCLA also, they were able to hit the 3-pointers and somehow kind of elevate their game offensively from what was a pretty ugly first quarter for both teams offensively. LSU led 13-9. They were able somehow to elevate their game, and maybe it did throw LSU's defense off a little bit. It certainly couldn't have been exactly what they were expecting. It was the first time Lauren Betts in her whole career college career had 2 fouls in the first quarter of any game. And so, for her to have to sit that long is probably not what LSU was expecting. And it forced other UCLA players to come through in the clutch, and they did. They did, to their credit. I think the game, it wasn't over at that point. Certainly, LSU only trailed at halftime, 31-25. But it was decisive. I think it was something that it was the stretch that LSU could not overcome, and they fought the whole second half, and they just couldn't quite get over that hill. And then Betts came back in and continued to play well, and that's what happened.
LSU started the game 1 of 12 from the floor, and I actually felt pretty good about the start for the Tigers. They were only down 7-4 at the time. It was like the first media timeout, and thinking, man, they're getting some good looks. Some of those are going to go. It feels like they're about to go on a run, and they did. They ended the first half up, or the first quarter up 13-9. But I had a totally different feeling at halftime, even though the deficit was only 6. Just like you said, it's like,
I agree.
That was the missed opportunity. Lauren Betts was out of the game for an entire quarter. She averages 31 minutes a game. She only played, what did she finish with? 25 tonight, only 25 minutes. So you kept her out for 10 whole minutes and lost 10 points from a 4-point lead to a 6-point deficit. And then, by the way, Lauren Betts finished the game with 2 fouls. I actually thought to myself, seeing some of her foul numbers, like for a big, she doesn't foul that much. I would have rolled the dice if I was UCLA's coach a little sooner and put her back in, but maybe she's just looking at the way the game is going and saying, shoot, let our guards cook, and we're going to have the lead and keep Lauren at 2 fouls anyway. That's what happened. Lauren Betts should have been called for another foul. She pushed Samaya Smith into Anissa Morrow and broke her nose. in the third quarter, and the refs went back and looked at it, but it was like it should have been a foul. But the only thing you can review is whether it's a flagrant foul, and it wasn't a flagrant foul on Betts. It wasn't her design.
No, but they missed the push completely.
Right, they missed the push. Zach, and the fact that LSU players collided, you can't call it flagrant. So it was just sort of an unfortunate situation. But Betts a physical player. Like, they could have called her for more fouls. They also, by the way, missed a crucial out of bounds call. LSU's down 4 with 2 minutes left. It was 2:31 left, in fact, so they couldn't review it. And the ball clearly goes off of Jaquez's foot out of bounds. Or maybe it was Kiki Rice, off of UCLA guard's foot out of bounds. And it should have been LSU ball with another chance to cut it to one possession, and they didn't get it. But look, I think bottom line, this felt like for a little while in the fourth quarter, another game where LSU was just going to will itself to a close win. And in the end, they just didn't quite have enough.
I want to go back to the officiating in those two instances. Betts clearly shoved Samaya, and it turned out to be worse than it was. I don't think it was worthy of any kind of flagrant foul or anything like that. It was just a very physical play. But she should have been called for shoving Samaya Smith. I mean, she put her hands forward into her chest, and then domino affected her into Anissa Morrow, who had to go to the locker room with a broken nose and came back in with no face guard on or anything. Played when she came back in, she played.
I'm just going to interrupt you real quick. I don't know if this is accurate, but somebody says in the post game, well, Smith said she didn't know what it was. Morrow who broke her nose, so I don't know. Maybe they're anyway. The point was Anissa Morrow's down on the court bleeding.
Exactly. And then the call in front of the LSU bench where the ball went off of Kiki Rice, I think her hand and foot, and the referee is literally 5 feet away, and she calls it for UCLA. I will say this all the time. I know it's easy to blame the referees and stuff like that, and I'll go back to the NOLA no call with the Saints and Rams in the NFC Championship game. And I always say this: if you put yourself in, if I may be a little indelicate, you put yourself in position to be screwed by the referees, you might get screwed by the referees. And I think that's what happened at LSU in this case. They were trailing. They're playing catch up the whole game, and these crucial calls don't go their way. And I've covered a lot of women's college basketball, Zach, over the years, and I've seen it over and over again. And referees give the benefit of the doubt to the higher ranked team, the higher seeded team, all the time. And sometimes it benefits LSU against a lot of teams, because LSU's had a lot of very good teams over the years, and sometimes it benefits them. And in this case, it did not. But those two calls are not why LSU lost the game. LSU lost it in the second quarter when UCLA got hot from 3-point range, and LSU gets outscored by 10 with their best player on the bench. LSU couldn't take advantage, offensively in the first half. They both in the first quarter they could have been up more, 13-9, and then they get down, in the second half. Just LSU had 8 fast break points in this game. 8. That's not their game. That's not LSU's game. That's not what what happened. And how many? I can't quantify it. I can't sit here and quantify. I'd have to go back and look at the game and pick each play. But how many times did LSU get a rebound or a steal or something like that, and they just couldn't end up converting on the other end? It happened a bunch, and it was enough to be the difference in the game. If LSU, now it's hard to convert everything, obviously, but there were a lot of instances where LSU, I guess the point I'm making, a lot of instances where LSU did itself in more than UCLA did, even with its prolific 3-point shooting, or more than a referee's call did here or there. For LSU to only score 65 points in the game, that's a territory where this LSU team, which is one of the 6 or 7 best scoring teams in the country, is going to be susceptible to losing a game, especially against a quality opponent like UCLA, and that's what happened.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight something. I just noticed the name here, Bruin-Walker. I think we have a UCLA fan here, which is great. Other players not named Betts stepped up, and that's exactly right. I mean, Lauren Betts had 17 points and 7 rebounds. She was fine. It's not like she played a bad game. But you go back to the Sweet 16 game last year, and then look at what happened in the first quarter this year. LSU had a plan for Betts, and it was a pretty effective plan. And she's going to get hers. You're not going to shut Lauren Betts out. But UCLA needed other players to step up. We talked all week since Friday night anyway, about how the pressure in this game was going to be on UCLA. They're the top seed, never made a Final Four. This is their opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. And frankly, they stepped up. Gabrielle Jaquez and Tamia Gardner got real hot from 3. They got enough rebounding without Lauren Betts in the game. I think you have to give credit to UCLA, especially as I mentioned. And yeah, the out of bounds call is a head scratcher. Don't understand it. But at that point, you're still, even if they call that right, you're down 4 with 2.5 minutes left. Like there's certainly UCLA had the advantage at that point and probably wins the game. And in those clutch moments, the Bruins found ways. They hit a couple of threes even late to put this game away. And so, credit where credit is due. Now, from LSU's perspective, I still go back to the shooting, Rab, and I don't like. I saw a comment here too about Kaylin Gilbert. She was 0 of 7 from the floor.
I don't understand why she was shooting the ball that much, late in the game, when she obviously just didn't. There was one critical possession, Zach, where she missed 3 shots. Yeah, she missed. She got the ball back. She missed. Got the ball back. Missed. And I don't know. Why she was. Look. She's in there because I would imagine at that point, Michaela Williams is kind of handling the point guard duties. LSU got to the Elite Eight this year, if I may go big picture here for a minute, if you don't mind, with a couple of glaring deficiencies. One at point guard. The biggest difference between this team and the national championship team 2 years ago is an Alexis Morris type player, running the show. No offense to last year Poa and no offense to Cheyenne Day Wilson, but they did not give LSU great guard play. Kim Mulkey, I asked her one time during the season, Kim, what do you do at the point guard position? What do you? She did this, like flipping the coin. That's where they were all season long. And Day Wilson started the game today, and she had 2 points and 3 assists. Okay, Poa hit a 3. That was her only points of the game. She had no assists. And, that was a big problem. And, of course, they were a little undersized in the post, though Morrow, of course, played bigger than she did, than she actually is, which is 6'1". But against a team with a really big post player like Betts, it's been a problem for LSU. And they despite that, they still got this far, 31-6, and got back to the Elite Eight. So I would say those things are good marks in LSU's favor. But it doesn't ease the sting of losing the game in this round of the tournament, which the bigger they are, the worse it hurts to lose them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, again, there's been some comments early about what LSU needs in the transfer portal. They have the nation's #1 recruiting class coming in next year, and they will hit the portal hard. They have done it every year under Kim Mulkey. I wouldn't think this would be any different. But I agree with you. I think Kim Mulkey's system demands point guard play, and it demands pretty good point guard play for it to operate at an elite level. Now, you can get away with it. We saw it against Florida State. LSU was able to get out in transition. They got real hot from the mid-range game, and they were able to feed the post and have success that way. But when you come up against an opponent that is elite defensively and has an elite post presence like UCLA, that all becomes much harder. If LSU had gotten hot for mid-range again tonight, maybe they end up winning that game. But it just makes your margin for error so small. And then you have a Michaela Williams go 4 of 13. Anissa Morrow was 7 of 19, and Kaylin Gilbert was 0 of 7. Those three that's a lot of shots and not a lot of points. And Anissa Morrow, by the way, did not have a double-double. She had 30 games this year with a double-double.
Right.
And this was one of 7 without. She finished with only 15 points and 7.
15 and 7. Samaya Smith had 10 rebounds. And again, Samaya Smith didn't score like she did in the other tournament games. She had over 20 points in the last tournament games. But she was tasked with being the primary defender on Lauren Betts. And I thought a pretty, Morrow was the most, of course, the most brave of LSU players, coming back with a broken nose. But Samaya Smith, I thought held her own. Yeah, only 4 points, but 10 rebounds. And she had a block, and she had 4 steals in the game. So I thought she did a pretty good job on Betts, who was important and was played a big role in UCLA's victory, but was not just overwhelming to LSU. And that was a lot put on Samaya Smith's plate, and it's a very good point for the future as LSU goes forward into next season without Anissa Morrow, obviously. So Samaya Smith will have play a big role next year, but they've got to go in the transfer portal and get a quality forward, like they did with Angel Reese in 2022, like they did with Anissa Morrow, in 2023. That this is a must get for LSU to be back in this position again next year. And like you said, it's disappointing for LSU today, but LSU is not going away. They got the #1 recruiting class coming in the country. They get the right pieces. They still got to have Kim Mulkey coaching the team. Flau'jae Johnson can go to the WNBA. I think it's likely she'll come back along with Michaela Williams. But if they can fill those key holes at point guard and at forward, I think they'll be right back in this similar position again next year.
Yeah, I mean, this is not any sort of an indictment on the future. I think LSU's future is bright. You mentioned Flau'jae could go to the WNBA, but she has a year of eligibility left. That's the one we got to see. I mean, Anissa Morrow, she's out of eligibility. She'll be gone. That's a big loss. But Samaya Smith, you don't ever want to say for sure in the transfer portal NIL era that somebody will be back. But
no, right.
They expect Samaya Smith and Michaela Williams to be back. Flau'jae, probably more likely than not. Is that fair to say?
For those people who are just coming into the middle of the story, Flau'jae Johnson's only a junior. She is draft eligible because she will be 22 by the draft, or at some point. She because of her age, she will be draft eligible as a junior. It's kind of like when a sophomore in baseball can go to the major league draft. But if they reach 21 by a certain age, very, very similar situation. I think if LSU had gone all the way, even gone to the Final Four, or certainly if they won the national championship, she might have said goodbye. I mean, how much more could she do? I would imagine that once the sting of this loss eases and she has to sit down and really think about it, I would think it's likely, not knowing her mind, not having spoken to her about it, that Flau'jae Johnson will not want to end on this note, that she'll want to come back. It's no guarantee. I mean, Anissa Morrow talked about this was the one empty line on her college resume was getting to the Final Four and or winning the national championship, and she never did it. It's really hard. It's really hard to do, and so sometimes schools and teams make it look easy to do, and it's not. So Anissa, goes, and we'll see if Flau'jae comes back. And Flau'jae, by the way, had such an off game against in the Sweet 16, and then she comes back tonight and it says 28 points, kept LSU in it, and 24 in the second half. So really, hats off to her and how she played tonight. Very bravely as well. I think she'll be back next year along with Michaela Williams, and that's a pretty good place to start.
No doubt. And she just about dragged LSU to a victory in this game, as you said. 28 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, 4 assists. I mean, played very, very well. She did have 4 turnovers. LSU had a little bit of a turnover problem. They had 15 turnovers. Their big 3, Morrow, Williams, and Johnson, had 13 of those 15 turnovers. So, but that their usage rate.
UCLA had 15 as well.
Yes, sometimes you take that. I did see someone's comment earlier about Sarah Williams, the 6'4" forward at Wisconsin, who's in the transfer portal. I think she will be a primary target for Kim Mulkey. She averaged 19 points and almost 10 rebounds a game this year, over 2 blocks. She's that dominant, like you said, Angel Reese type post presence.
Yeah, I don't know how you say her name exactly, but there is a video out there on X, formerly Twitter, with Michaela Williams looking at the camera going, Sarah. You know who she's talking about and talking to is so I don't think it's any secret that LSU, like a lot of other schools, would like her.
They're going to have competition, but
yes,
LSU has shown that they can go get the big fish. This program can go get the biggest fish out there in the pond. So I think that's definitely a possibility. And then a point guard, like I see Hakeem's comments here about like needing more 3-point shooting. I don't know that you're ever going to see a Kim Mulkey team launch 30 3-pointers a game like that. Just I don't think is in her DNA. But I do think if you get that elite point guard that they did not have this year, it opens up your shooters for more of those open threes. And maybe they take 15 or 20 a game instead of just 10 or 15 a game. Maybe it increases a little bit. Maybe the efficiency increases. I do want to bring this up too. I hadn't realized this, but I'm looking at the box score here. Rab, UCLA was 20 of 28 from the free throw line. At one point, they were 8 of 16. So my quick math tells me here they made their last 12 free throws in the fourth quarter, which is obviously when you're trying to hold on to a lead is a big deal. And UCLA, again, you got to tip your cap.
Yeah, Kiki Rice, there's so much focus with UCLA is on Lauren Betts, but Kiki Rice is also an excellent player. She was only 1 of 7 from from the field, 0-3 from 3-point range, but she made all 6 of her free throws down the stretch, and then she's made like about 40 in a row in the NCAA tournament, according to what the ESPN announcers have said. And she had 8 assists, so that's really excellent. UCLA had 15 assists on 21 made baskets overall. That's a very nice percentage. LSU had 10 assists on 25 made baskets. So, yeah, they're a good team. They're a good team. I don't quite think that. I think UCLA USC is going to lose to UConn tomorrow, and I think it's probably going to be UConn and South Carolina in the final yet again. So I don't think UCLA is going to win the national championship, but they're a tough out. They're a tough out, just like LSU was a tough out, and a lot of teams are. And it's hard to believe, not that it means much LSU fans, but with all the tradition that UCLA has in so many sports, that this is the first trip to the women's Final Four for UCLA ever. Yeah, that's kind of hard to believe. So congratulations to the Bruins. I know it probably won't mean as much in Westwood in LA as would in Louisiana for LSU to make it, but I
mean, they got their fans though. Like
it does. They had a good fan turnout, obviously in Spokane, much closer to home than it was for LSU. But LSU had some fans there too. I was impressed to see their little cheering section there. It was pretty good.
Yeah, no doubt. I will say I'm a little surprised, just kind of looking back. You said South Carolina and UConn. They've only played for the championship once. That was 3 years ago. South Carolina won.
Seems like more than
64-49. But it's really because the baton was almost passed, right? Like UConn was the dominant program, the team you had to beat every single year to win a national championship. And then it flipped in the last 5 years or so. It's been South Carolina has been that team. And so we haven't seen them actually go head-to-head except for that meeting in the final 3 years ago. They may have met in Final Fours other than that. I'm just looking at championship games. But it certainly seems like we're headed toward that. Anyway, let's go big picture just for a couple of minutes, Rab, and then we'll see if we can get Reed Darcey on, or otherwise we'll wrap this up. But I went back and looked at the preseason rankings. LSU was 7th in the preseason. They started the year very, very good. They were undefeated until losing at South Carolina in mid-January. But they peaked around number 4, number 5, and did they maybe got to number 3 in the country briefly, and then they lost to South Carolina and kind of fell back, and they just lived in that 5 to 10 range all year long. And here they are in the Elite 8, kind of in the last 5 to 10 in the country, and that's where they lose. So you can't look at this and say it's a disappointing season. You can't look at this and say it was a great season where they exceeded expectations. But I will say they had high expectations and they met them. They just weren't quite as good as the top 5 teams in the country. And every time they ran into one of those top 5 teams, it showed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like I said, they were a very good team. You don't win 31 games and finish third in what was a much more difficult SEC than it was 2 years ago or even last year, and win all these games and get to the Elite 8 in the NCAA tournament without being a very good team. But they had a couple of deficiencies, and yeah, they lost to South Carolina. They lost twice to Texas. And then the other 2 losses were to teams that ended up being pretty good teams too. Alabama was nationally ranked, and Ole Miss made it to the Sweet 16, losing to UCLA on Friday, and then they lose to UCLA. So it's been a good season. Look, it's hard to, if you're an LSU fan or an LSU player or coach, it's hard to look beyond anything with the disappointment, but at this point. As Kim Mulkey said, I remember after they lost to Iowa in the Elite 8 last year, she said it's supposed to hurt. If you don't care, it doesn't hurt, but it's supposed to be painful. And when you really look at it, only one team ends up happy out of 68. I mean, it's like if I may, it's kind of like a golf tournament. All these players are going to go to the Masters in a little over a week. All these dreams and aspirations. Only one person truly goes home happy. Out of all those 90 players in the field, and that's the way it is here. It's just one team, and then you have to just say, well, we made it to. If you're, whatever team you follow, hey, we made it to this level of the tournament. We made it to that round of the tournament, and it's an achievement. This is LSU's 11th trip to the Sweet 16. 6 of those times they've made it through to the Final Four. One time they won it all. It's really hard, and it's supposed to be hard to take when you don't advance. But if you get to the Final Four, it's on every level of the tournament. You have 4 teams we're in Baton Rouge. Only one of them advanced to the Sweet 16. 4 teams in Spokane in this regional. Only one advanced. 4 teams are going to the Final Four. Only one is going to win it all. It's really hard. It's what makes these tournaments such great events.
No, well said. I mean, yeah, it's never going to feel good when you lose. But I think big picture, you have to look at it and say, this LSU team did what it was supposed to do. They certainly weren't disappointing all year long, but they were also clearly one rung on the ladder below these top 5 teams and the teams that will end up
I agree.
For the Final Four. And that is South Carolina and UCLA from today. And then tomorrow you've got Texas facing TCU and old friend Haley Van Lith. And then USC and UConn in the last Elite Eight game, also from Spokane. So
big picture again, Zach, too. I think the fact that they won, this is probably when you thought under Kim Mulkey that they might go to the Final Four first and then win the national championship, right? This is probably when you thought this would be their year, year 3, year 4, something like that. The fact that she won in year 2 was took everybody by surprise, right? I mean, it took LSU by surprise probably as well, But it's not the way it works. So sometimes things go against what you think conventional wisdom dictates, like UCLA, outscoring LSU by 10 with Lauren Betts on the bench, which I thought LSU's in a great spot. They're going to go up by 10 or so at halftime because Betts being out of the game, and they might be tempted to bring her back in and risk the 3rd foul. And that if that had happened, how much would that have changed the complexion of the game? But that's the way sports works, and that's why you love these tournaments. I love you're watching the triumph of the teams and the sweet sorrow of the other teams. It's just it's just so dramatic, and it just means so much to everybody, and it's the human emotion of it that's every year is always the same. It's just fantastic to watch.
These games, and you look at the men's tournament this year, where it we got 3 1 seeds in the Final Four, and Auburn, I don't know the score right now, but Auburn was winning the last one.
They're winning. They're up 9.
Yeah. So it could be all 4 number 1 seeds. Even then, you look at how Florida had to escape last night against Texas Tech. You look at how, Houston had to hold on to its games against Gonzaga and Purdue and come up with it in the last minute. You look at how Auburn may have to fight for the it is never easy. The better team, and the women's game has traditionally been more top heavy, but I think that's changing. You're seeing more upsets. Like Notre Dame was number 1 in the country only a few weeks ago, and they're out of this tournament. So you see more of these upsets. And I do think if LSU had managed to win this game today, if they had played a better second quarter, or maybe UCLA has a few more threes bounce out or something, this season would have been a triumph. And I don't really care what happens in Tampa. I mean, obviously you want to win the national championship, but if you had made it back to the Final Four, that to me would have all been lagniappe. Like you would have been very happy with that season ending that way. So I did see one comment. Jackson says we need some closer Sweet 16 locations. Next year, it's Fort Worth and Sacramento. So just like this year where you had Birmingham and Spokane, and you really wanted Birmingham, but they're only going to let 2 SEC teams go there. That's probably going to be the case with Fort Worth next year. So you are in a hotel room in Fort Worth, Rab.
Yes.
That will be LSU's goal next year, is to get a top 4 seed. So you get the first 2 rounds in Baton Rouge again, and then to get a Fort Worth regional location and have a horde of Tiger fans driving up there to support you.
Yeah, the arena here in Fort Worth is called Dickey's Arena. The Gene Company, they've got the naming rights. As where the NCAA Gymnastics Championship. I'm going to probably be back here in a few weeks for the NCAA Gymnastics Championships. They've got the semifinals and finals here in Fort Worth, like a long-term contract, and that's a good location. I think Sacramento is a little better than Spokane because it's a bigger city and it's a little easier to get to, and it's not that far from the Bay Area, where there's 3 big airports in San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. That you not that far to drive to Sacramento. I don't know what the infatuation the NCAA has with Spokane. It is so remote. It's a small city. And then you got the women's tournament, as Kim Mulkey was saying yesterday's press conference, they need to revisit this thing of having 2 regionals in one site, just having two regional cities instead of 4. it's a small city to accommodate 8 teams and their bands and their travel parties and their fans.
Yeah, Reed had to stay in Idaho, which is not that far from Spokane.
But he's commuting. I said, how's the commute been? From Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
There's no hotel rooms left. Yeah,
and there's nowhere else to fly to. In Spokane, Seattle, Boise, these are Portland, Oregon. These cities are all at least 3.5, 4 hours away. There's no place else convenient to fly to.
Well, the other thing too is
I don't know why.
I'm looking. Next year's Fort Worth and Sacramento. I'm looking. The 2027 and 28 have been announced. Also, we're going off on a tangent here. It's okay. 2027, Philadelphia and Las Vegas. 2028, Portland, Oregon, and Washington D.C. When you only have 2, it's hard to represent every kind of corner of the country like you could when you had 4, where you're always going to have one in the South or in Texas or Oklahoma City or somewhere that would be drivable or at least a short flight for an SEC team like LSU. Right. And instead, now next year Fort Worth is close enough. The 2 years after that, it doesn't matter how good of a season you have. You're not going to be rewarded if you're LSU because the closest of any of those is, I guess, Washington D.C. Like, I don't know. When you only have 2, you're really hamstringing yourself as far as rewarding the top seeds.
Yeah, 100%. Back in the day when Simone Augustus started playing for LSU, the NCAA also predetermined the first and second round sites for a number of years. So I remember they got sent to Eugene, Oregon for the first year, and Simone's freshman year when they made it to the Elite Eight that year. They went to Eugene, Oregon. They came home. Then they went to Stanford for the regional. But it were 4 regional sites then. So the NCAA has partially gotten it right. I think they decided the women's game does not have enough broad fan support to have all these games on neutral sites because Oregon was not there, and there were very few fans there.
I get that.
Yeah. So I think they're doing it right by having these 16 first and second round sites on campus. The men have not been allowed to play on campus since 1986, which is when LSU played on campus. LSU's men went all the way to the Final Four that year here in Dallas, and ever since then they've all been to neutral sites. And I think that's proper for the men's tournament. I think for the women's tournament they got it right. But Zach, the biggest thing with having 2 cities to each host 2 regionals in women's basketball, it just smacks of we're trying to do something on the cheap. It's kind of like remember in 2021 when the whole men's tournament was in Indiana, the whole women's tournament was in San Antonio, and the men had a much better weight room and facilities in Indiana because one of the players took a video of the women's players. This is what we have here compared to what they have. It was a mini scandal, and rightfully so. They would never do this in the men's game. They would never put 2 regionals just in Indianapolis and the other 2 here in Dallas, for example. They would never ever do that. They got 4 regional sites, and that's proper, and it allows people to be a little closer. Auburn is the number 1 overall men's seed. They got to play as close to home as possible. Atlanta is very, very close to Auburn's backyard, basically.
Playing an hour and a half away, yeah.
Yeah, so and good for Auburn. They're the number 1 overall seed. Whether you think they deserve to be, I don't know, but they are. And this just really makes things pretty difficult for a lot of teams that are not able to play that close to home. So I hope what Kim Mulkey says doesn't fall on deaf ears with the NCAA. You got to get cities that want to host these tournaments, but I think with the women's tournament is growing, the way it has grown in the last few years, especially since COVID, it deserves to be more regionalized and brought to more parts of the country, not fewer. And I
completely agree. I think probably Big Ten country and SEC country each need to have a regional every year, as they do in the men's tournament.
Yes.
And then the other 2 you can kind of rotate between East Coast and West Coast and figure it out. But as women's basketball popularity increases, the chance of that I think increases too. They've already got budgeted out the next 2 years and already had all that. They're not going to change it, or next 3 years.
3 years,
yeah. Fort Worth and Sacramento next year, Philadelphia and Vegas 2027, and then Portland, Oregon, and Washington D.C. in 2028. But starting in 2029, maybe we can hope that they can go. That's not going to help this year's team or next year's team or anything like that. But
that's
just
expectation.
Yeah. To bring things back, Rab, before we wrap it up, LSU loses 72-65 to UCLA in the Elite Eight. The Bruins go on to their first Final Four. They will face the winner of USC and UConn tomorrow night's game in the Final Four in Tampa. And for LSU, kind of another year of what if, almost kind of a famous win, and instead it ends up being a bitter defeat.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's bitter because the more you have at stake, the bigger your dreams are. LSU started out like a house of fire in this tournament, right? They scored 204 points combined with these two 100-point games against San Diego State and Florida State. Only the second team ever in the entire NCAA tournament to score 100 points in back-to-back games, which is pretty remarkable. And it's not the other team wasn't UConn or Tennessee or something like that. It was Long Beach State, which made it to the Final Four the year they did it back in 1988. And so then they beat a very quality team at NC State. Got the number 2 seed in the regional, and they just come up short. Again, I think it was. I think they did about as good when you look back at it, and it's always you always think of what might have been, and it's when you lose by 7, it's not hard to think how the game could have been different. It's not like you lost by like Houston stopped Tennessee today, right? It's not like that in the men's tournament, but it's not hard to think that it could have been a little different for LSU. But you said it, Zach. I think it was very telling that when LSU got up against these top 5 teams, Texas, South Carolina, and UCLA, they weren't quite able to get over the hump against any of them, and because again they lacked some things at point guard. They lacked a little bit in the post game most of the season. Although Samaya Smith played great in the tournament overall, I almost want to say you would say she was LSU's MVP in the NCAA.
I think they're very much more excited to have her back and be a cornerstone of next year's team than maybe they were a month ago. So
and she's
big time.
She's not the most physical player, but she's very athletically gifted. She's very smooth around the basket, and she's had these 2 big knee injuries that. Yeah, the last one was in November of 23 that put her out the rest of all the last season, and so it's there's certainly hope for the future for LSU. And like Kim Mulkey has come here and done what you probably expected Kim Mulkey would do. They've hosted all 4 years, have been a top 4 regional seed. They've won 26 games, 34 games, 31-31. They've won a national title and been to 2 Elite Eights. This is it's for as good as LSU basketball has been at times. And I covered those years when they went to the Final Four, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5 straight Final Fours. Never won a game in the Final Four, but they went to them, and so she's taken them to that next level. And they went to 6 straight Elite Eights back then too, because they went in 03, as I said, when Simone Augustus was a freshman. So this is that level, and even heightened for LSU women's basketball. And it's a program that has reached a level of being borderline elite, but being really, really great, and being a team that I thought was one of those 7 or so teams going into the season that could win the national championship if things fell their way. And just didn't quite fall their way this time, but it doesn't mean that they won't be back and be a contender again next year. I think they have an excellent chance to do so.
All right, so Reed Darcey, unfortunately, is not going to be able to pull away from LSU's post-game availability, but we will do a full LSU Insider podcast with Reed later in the week and wrap up this season and look ahead to the offseason and what the Tigers and Kim Mulkey will be looking for in the transfer portal as well. So instead, we got plenty of insight from Scott Rabalais, and we appreciate everybody else hanging out and a lot of good comments today. So keep it locked here. Subscribe to the LSU Tigers at NOLA.com YouTube channel. Sign up for notifications for whenever we've got a new podcast up. And we appreciate you tuning in. We'll be here for the rest of spring football, baseball season, and into the summer, and looking forward to the 2025 football season as well. These LSU women's basketball tournament updates were brought to you all month long by Our Lady of the Lake Health. They are the official championship healthcare partner of LSU athletics. He's Scott Rabalais. I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you all for watching. This has been the LSU Insider.